Hi, Misha here, and this is going to be a bit of an update to the recent MiG-21 video I did. There's a few things I wanted to talk about, so I've got my models all out, all 1/72 scale diecast from Hobby Master. You saw this one in the earlier video. This is a Red Army, not Red Army, sorry. It is late. This is a Soviet Air Force 21, nominally an SMT, although some SMTs, actually quite a few of them, were updated to 21 BIZs. So yeah, anyway, it's my first Red Army MiG-21. I said it again, I apologize. This is going great. This is my first Russian 21 that I bought a while back when these came out about a year ago. Before it, I had this one. This is a 21 BIZ from the Finnish Air Force. And I really like the whole Finnish thing. I've got quite a few Finnish planes, and what's kind of fun is they're each from different nations. And I want to first say thanks. No one commented that I had stuck the fuel tanks on the inner pylons, hard points, not the outer. That's because these are pretty fidgety to keep on and they fall off a lot. I eventually just glued them. A tiny little dot, nothing that couldn't be pulled off, but just enough because the peg they use, because of how small the wings are, it's pretty small. Anyway, they had fallen off and I'd accidentally put them on the wrong place. So, sorry. Maybe mine's special and it's actually plumbed on the inner hard points instead of the outer. And then I also wanted to talk about the J7, which I just recently picked up because this was just released in May. Okay, I gotta be honest, and I'm gonna need you guys' help that can see. To my mind, I'm a little disappointed with this model. Not in its construction, actually it's made really well, but the details. To me, in my mind, not being able to see pictures, this just doesn't seem like a MiG from China. This doesn't seem like a J7. And as I talked about in my Chinese video, they reverse engineered, but they were basing it on early MiG-21 interceptor versions, like the 21F. It wasn't until the 70s that the 21 BIZ came out. And by that time, Russia and China weren't really on speaking terms. This J7, to me, has all the details of a BIZ, not a J7. But maybe I'm wrong, because there are a ton of variations in the J7. So let me know. We'll look at it again before it's over. But it looks just like they repainted a BIZ and called it good. So in that sense, I was a little disappointed because I was expecting more differences. And I didn't really get it. At the same time this came out, this one came out. And this is a very different story. I wasn't expecting much out of it, and I am very happy with it. So let me explain why. So the 21 SMT is an evolution of the 21S, which was an expanded variant with the new SAP-4 radar. It also added extra fuel tankage, hence the kind of humpback. And for modeling purposes, it was really that series, the 21S, was the first to have 4 underwing hardpoints instead of 2. The tank itself and all that was actually taken, at least in some part, from the 21R, the reconnaissance version. And from here we had the 21S, the 21SM. There was to be a 21MT, but it didn't matter. M being modernized, T being tank. And then those were ultimately evolved into the 21 BIZ, BIS, which is pretty much the ultimate model. It had the most options for weapons, it had the most up-to-date engine, uprated engines. It had the best radars. It was, well, yeah, the ultimate version of the series. And there had been an effort for a long time to kind of blend the MiG-21 to give it some ground attack, some multi-role capability. So, with that preamble, what do we have here? This is a MiG-21 PFM. This is a second generation. These others we've looked at qualify as third in the series. Now this is an early-ish third, and the biz is pretty much the end. Now the very first generations were, well, mostly prototypes and early models like the 21F and 21F-13. And those are mostly daytime fighters. They either had limited radar or no radar. The 21P was an interceptor version. The 21PF, the F is for uprated engine, and the 21PFM is modernized. These carried, at the time, quite a decent radar. And while the early versions had kind of the front opening cockpit, but this was the first version to have the kind of now classic hinge to the side cockpit, also with a new ejection seat. And they started to expand the weapons capabilities. But this still has only 2 underwing hardpoints for missiles. Early versions of the MiG-21 had a 23mm gun, but for a time they dropped it. With this, they brought it back as a gun pod with 200 rounds for the cannon. Now, eventually they would go back to integrating the cannon inside the body, but for a time it was an optional pod mounted under. And you'll notice some other differences here. If you look at the top, you'll notice it doesn't have the bulge for the saddle fuel tank on top, and it has the extended kind of a root vertical for the tail. Also, the tail itself is of a different shape a bit to the later versions. And the pitot tube, the pitot tube, is different. Doesn't have quite the same things. It doesn't have little vortex generators that started to appear on later versions. And so I was really happy that Hobbymaster put such effort into recreating one of the true interceptor versions, not the multi-role version, I guess you could say. Oddly, all of the rest of these, the pitot tube, the pitot tube, is loose in the box, and you just plug it in, and there you go. With the 21 PFM here, the tube actually came pre-glued, pre-installed. Kind of neat. And notice they don't have the same hump quite on the back here. And they have an antenna on top. That antenna, the way it's swept back, very much reminds me MiG-15, MiG-17. Very much a callback in a lot of little details to the earlier MiGs. I really like having it now because it kind of fills that gap. When you just put a 21 Biz next to a MiG-17, you can tell they're both MiGs, but there's a bit of a jump. This, in the details, is more classic. You can tell it's harkening back. These started to be developed in the early to mid-60s. They went into service prototype style in 64, main style by 66. So they were very much Vietnam War. In fact, there was a variant made of this for the Vietnamese. But already by 68, 69, they started to be replaced by other versions. Now, the 21S was a little bit of a different path because this interceptor was for a different role. Now, the thing is, this early version, and funny enough, these other models came with multiple things for the wings and middle fuel tanks. This one doesn't really have any external fuel tanks, meaning it has extremely short range. You know, like 2 missiles and 1 gun pod of 200 rounds. This was a scramble point interceptor, and the idea was to just station these around, and if American bombers or whatnot came in, to just fly them up and intercept. This was not a patroller. This wasn't a long ranger. This was not designed for fighter bomber stuff. This didn't have really a lot of ground attack ability. Nope, this was an air-to-air, a fighter and interceptor. So, I'm very happy that Hobby Master went to the effort with this one. I'm also happy that the ordnance plugs on well without falling off. It does only have the 2 underwing hardpoints, not 4. And, best of all, I like to put mine on the stands. I like to have them in flight mode. In most of these, when you do that, you can't have the center line item in there. Usually it's a fuel tank, sometimes it's a bomb or a missile. And that often extends to gun pods. I'm kind of sad when I can't put my gun pods on. Luckily, this gun pod is slim enough that it does slot in between the body and the stand just fine. I was worried it may not, but the stand just kind of sits over it. And luckily, this one has 2 small holes in the wings that the stand pops into, and it fits very tight. So it's actually very secure, even with that on there. So I'm just tickled. It's the small things. And I guess, too, because I wasn't expecting much out of it. And the only reason I really ordered this is because I hadn't given Pete's Collectibles business lately, just because there hasn't been much of anything. But I was getting the Hinkle HE111, and, you know, it's always good to buy a couple at once, and these aren't uber expensive. He had a couple left in stock. I just decided to grab one on a whim. And the truth is, I kind of like it more than my other MiGs. It's just kind of a clean, simple little 21. So not expecting much, and very happy. Whereas with the J7, kind of feel a little bit the opposite. Let me pop it on the spinny thing and see what you think. Alright, have the J7 on the stand. I could be wrong. I could be misreading, not understanding what I've read. Again, not being able to look at pictures can sometimes be a bummer. But from what I've read, how I understand the J7 was developed, I don't understand how this looks identical to this. Because the J7 started off as a copy of the 21 F-13, which was the forerunner of that 21 PFM we just looked at. And of course, China made lots of changes over time. From what I've read, it seems like the J7 should have a slightly larger wing, and it seems like it maybe shouldn't have the big saddle fuel tank. And one thing that I think is pretty clear, the cockpit this came with is the same side opening cockpit. As far as I know, the Chinese planes either early on had the front opening cockpit or later had a more modern Western style rear hinge cockpit. Correct me please if I'm wrong. it just seems like this should be a different mold. If anything, it should look closer to the PFM, not the Biz. What do you think, though? Again, maybe I'm just not getting it. Because typically Hobby Master is pretty good, at least about the big details. I know they get little things wrong, but this doesn't seem like a little thing. And let's be honest, they're out of China. You'd think they would, yeah, you'd think they would get their own nation's planes right. So please let me know, because I'm confused. Because I'm just having this fear that they just took the 21 Biz tooling and just gave it a repaint and called it a J7. Instead of doing the proper thing like they did with the PFM and actually making new tooling for it. It's over here. This is what I was expecting. I mean, not looking like this, but this level of attention. Not perfect, maybe, but good. Again, this just doesn't seem right, but let me know. By the way, this is supposed to be a J7 Night Fighter. I think Flying Mule claims it to be a J7D. I'm not sure. They've used a lot of different names. In fact, the home naming convention of MiG-21s in general is pretty crazy. But, yeah, I just kind of wanted to do a little update video. Now that I had the new model, also apologize for goofing the fuel tanks on the Finnish Biz. And ask those questions about the J7. So please let me know what you think and what you know. Because one reason I really like having models is a lot of times it's the first and only way for me to know how something looks. So if it doesn't look right, I would like to know so I can, mentally have my library right. Well, I appreciate you tuning in. If you could help me out or have any questions, please post them. As always, I greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha. Catch you very soon next time.